Expert in your field and in area of education, and we will be very happy that to listen to you and get new ideas on this. Dr. Gunjan will be speaking on uh, project-based learning and learning outcomes. So it's a very interesting topic, and it will really be of use to all of us. I'll briefly introduce to you Dr. Gunjan Sharma. Dr. Gunjan Sharma did her PhD from Department of Education, University of Delhi in 2014. 2008, she also did Master of Education with distinction from the Department of Education, again from Delhi University. And she also is a Master of Commerce from University of Delhi. Her current position is Assistant Professor, School of Education Studies, with additional charge as Deputy Dean Planning since 2020 and Associate Director IQAC, Ambedkar University of Delhi. And this position she is holding since 2022. And many prestigious awards are to her credit and fellowships also. She is Erasmus Plus Faculty Exchange in Ludwig's University of Education, Germany, twice, January 2018 and then June and October 2019. From 2016 to 17, she got Fulbright Nehru postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Educational Leadership and Foundations, McKay School of Education, Brigham Young University, Utah, USA. And in 2009, she also got university medal from the university. So it's a very brilliant profile she has, and we are very fortunate that she is with us today, and she'll be talking on the topic which I just mentioned. And book on schooling and aspirations in the urban margins, ethnography of education in the Indian context. She published this book in 2021, and a large number of publications and international journals are to her credit. So, friends, we will be listening to Dr. Gunjan Sharma, and thank you, Dr. Gunjan, for accepting our invitation. And now the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. The campus is so beautiful that you rarely get to see such campuses nowadays. If you come to my campus, you'll get scared that how do they even manage running a full university. So I'll maybe go to that side and use the PowerPoint. And also, I just wanted to say that in case you feel that there is some degree of repetition that has happened in my presentation and some other presentation, you can stop me because there's too much that I have to cover, and I can easily switch between two topics that I'm going to discuss. The first one is learning outcomes, and Professor Jyoti Raina informed me just last night that she did an activity with you all on learning objectives. So there's a certain degree of overlap, but learning outcomes are very different and they are extremely important now for all of us to engage with. So I'll maybe show you, demonstrate some of the aspects of learning outcomes, and then maybe move to project-based learning, where I'll just simply not go into the history, philosophy of the whole thing, but focus on what does it mean and how do we do it. Right? So I'll begin with this. Yes, the context of this whole learning outcomes approach is not very recent, although now we see it very vehemently in our education policy, national education policy 2020. But this is not a very recent development that has happened. It dates back to 1978 Washington Accord. The duration of this accord was between 1978 to 2014, where it was decided that the focus of education, the way we do education, should shift entirely. So rather than focusing on what to teach and what are the objectives from the content perspective, one should look at what is it that we are trying to achieve in the students. So in a simple term, if I have to define learning outcome, it will really mean what is it that a student is able to do after the completion of a lesson. So as of now, if you look at objectives generally mean what is it that the content is aiming to do, what are the directions of the lesson that we will take. But outcomes are focused on the skills that the students develop and are able to demonstrate at the end of a lesson or a course or a program. And you can see that it has become extremely important, central in the national education policy of India as well, wherein the problem has been defined in terms of poor learning outcomes, both at school and higher education stages. I'm not sure if you are familiar with ASA reports. These are developed by Pratham every year. And ASA report is the annual status of education report. That's the full form. Every year they come out with a test on an achievement test report on schools. And they tell us that the class 5 child is not able to read a class 2 test and is not able to solve simple mathematical problems that should, a child should be able to solve at class 2 level. And this approach, the way achievement tests are conducted and what they are measuring is basically the beginning point where in India, this whole approach is focused towards learning outcomes starting to come. Pratham began its work through ASAR in 1990s, mid 1990s, and since then, each year it has been telling that the learning outcomes in schools are extremely poor. Of course, for higher education, for us, we don't find many such reports. But now the UGC and the National Policy on Education both have decided that a learning outcomes test will be conducted even at a higher education level. In all likelihoods, it will be designed by the National Testing Agency. And an achievement test will be conducted to identify what all students in higher education are able to do. When the students go to industry and work in different work situations, it is found that they are really not, attuned to the requirements of their jobs. And this becomes a problem, and there is a general, sense in the industry that the students are not competent for job roles. And therefore, the NEP 2020 says that the learning, in the school education, but also universities is actually very poor. And what do they mean by that is the focus on learning outcomes is somewhat missing. So the mission of the policy, the whole mission is to ensure that there are, a focus on learning outcomes and all students develop learning outcomes. So that's the very background of this. And while there are certain advantages of this approach, it allows us to think about what exactly is a child able to do. There are certain problems as well, and these problems are pointed by international, union groups of teachers, of academics. They say that when we follow an outcomes-based approach, quality gets defined in the minimum terms. So quality gets defined only in terms of what is it that a student is able to do, and nothing beyond that. Like for example, if I tell you that particularly in social sciences, we teach different kinds of theories, different kinds of perspectives, different kinds of skills. But right away, despite our teaching very well, a student may not really be able to understand that immediately. It takes time. It takes other kinds of activities that the students do independently to really master what they have been taught. And therefore, it's the measurement is not immediate. Outcomes get demonstrated sometimes later. For instance, I have just told you about learning outcomes. Now, if I ask you what is a learning outcome, you will define it in your own language. You will not define it in the way in which I have said, or in the way in which it is technically correct. But that doesn't mean you have not understood. You would have understood. So the point is that it takes time to learn, and the outcomes sometimes are delayed. In fact, in social sciences, it's very delayed. In sciences, probably it's more immediate. Like probably in your area, some formula, a student may be able to develop the grasp of it immediately. But in our case, understanding of theory of political economy, it does take time. Teaching and learning is defined in this context in terms of standardized achievement test. So if a student performs poorly, it will be said that the teacher hasn't taught well, which has its own problems and limitations. A teacher may teach very well, but a student may still not be able to, pass in a test or demonstrate 100% competence in an area. Because learning happens in, it gets influenced by different kinds of things. It gets influenced even by the weather, climate, the situation of a child at home, maybe language issues and varied kinds of other. And then, teacher performance gets measured in terms of learning outcome. And there's a push that even in higher education, don't, have a promotion system just by the base of seniority and number of years. Promote teachers who deliver better outcomes. It has its advantages, but also its limitations. We know that it will have a fallout. And, not all teachers, like for instance, I very clearly remember that there was a paper called Operational Research. The teacher that taught the course was the best. I don't think I've ever met a professor better than that. But I really did extremely badly in the exam. So that was the first of all, paper course that I got. And that was true for all my graduates. There was no problem with the teacher. Now, if we connect the promotion of this teacher, salary of this teacher with the outcome that we were achieving, it would be, in my view, very unfair because the problem was somewhere in our part that we were not able to understand or the area was very difficult. Similarly with philosophy, many people struggle with philosophy. And the part where, the most significant issue lies is that knowledge gets translated into content. And maybe I'll not delve into this in greater detail, but you know, to philosophers, maybe some of you would have done philosophy of science or would have interest in that. One would know that knowledge is extremely wide and broad and can't just be defined in terms of syllabus. So, therefore, in this context, there is a demand for not doing away with learning outcomes, but allowing teachers to develop their own outcomes so that there is greater independence autonomy. This may not work in an area like agricultural sciences or physics or chemistry. There can be standardized outcomes, but in social sciences, there is a clear demand. So I'll skip this part and then move to the context of why is it that one should develop these outcomes. For the student point of view, it is extremely important because the students are able to understand what they are doing better. So if they know what is the intent of the whole situation, learning situation, they will do better. They are able to connect with the material of the course really well. They are also able to understand the goals of the assessment in terms of what is expected out of them. And they're also able to connect different courses together. They can easily see that there are connections in the different outcomes that different courses are trying to achieve. From a teacher's perspective, the process of developing offers opportunity to reflect on the course content. That why are at all we teaching this. At my university, the interesting thing is that we teach the courses that we have designed. There are no ready-made courses that we get. We design and we teach. But if one goes to other universities, one also sees there are pre-designed courses that a teacher is teaching. In those cases, sometimes even teacher doesn't know why am I teaching this? Why is this course important? Where is it going? So if a teacher for a lesson formulates these learning outcomes, it becomes possible for them to reflect and think, what is it that I am trying to do it for? It's extremely useful for assessment. Once you have learning outcomes, your assessment design becomes very clear overall and very logical. And it's also transparent. So students can't, fight with you that why did you give me marks less? Why did you give me 3 marks more? Because then everything is very objective, standardized, and laid down very clearly. So these are the advantages of this work. And there are definitions, there are older definitions, and there is a new definition. This theory by Biggs, I'll share that with you. But this definition is the most recent one. So it is defined as learning outcomes as what levels of understanding we want from our students and in what topics, and what performances of understanding would give us this knowledge. This might seem a little complicated, but when you move to the next slide, it becomes very easy. So when one has to design learning outcomes, one has to think of these four questions. One, what are the educational purposes that are to be attained? What experiences can be provided that are likely to attain these purposes? How can these educational experiences be effectively organized? And how can we determine whether these purposes are being attained or not? So you're beginning from the aim, then what is it that you will do in the class? Then how will you organize what you are planning to do in the class, and then check, assess whether what you try to achieve, what you set out to achieve, has been achieved or not. It's very simplistic and commonsensical, nothing grand about it. But this is, what we are doing. And I'll again skip this because it may not be of much use here. But the theory that I was referring to, the most recent one, is the constructivist alignment theory. And I think Professor Rena talked to you about behaviorism, constructivism in some level. So the part about constructivism is that you are focusing on the students. What is it that the student is able to achieve at the end of the class? So I'll skip this and come to the more operational part of it. So there are certain standardized given ways of stating learning outcomes, and probably as you attend this, you could think of any course that you are probably transacting or any area in which you are working. And there is a formula like we have for different mathematical equations, which is by the end of this unit, whatever the unit is, it could be a course, it could be a lesson, it could be a program, it could be a particular activity. So like after my class, here, after this first session in FTP, the students will be able to, there's a word that you place and the object. So a student will be able to do something, and what is that something is defined as an object. If there is a context and a condition, then that is to be added. For instance, if I say today, by the end of my class, the colleagues will be able to design learning outcomes for their individual courses. So this is a statement of outcome that I have made using this one. And there are these examples. I think Professor Rena also did Bloom's taxonomy. She probably talked about it. If not, then maybe I'll touch upon it briefly. But you can design these outcomes for different, categories of goals that you achieve in the class. When we go in a class and teach, there is a certain content that we have to transact. There are also certain set of skills that we like to develop, and certain values that may not be very clear, but they may be underlying the whole thing. Like for instance, if I say that if I'm teaching a course on citizenship, if I'm teaching a course on fundamental duties, one of my goals, values is also to prepare the students to become good citizens, which I may not be stating, which may not be immediately achievable, but it's a value that underlies my course. So these are different domains of any course, any knowledge area. that we usually go with in class. So you can specify the outcomes for each of these in your own course. So, for instance, for a course that I teach at my university, the content learning outcome is by the end of this course, the students will be able to categorize different education policies according to the political economic ideologies from which they. For skills, there's a course that I teach on the basic research skills. By the end of this class, the students will be able to cite, this is a work, different types of reference sources correctly as per APA. That's the referencing style that we use. In the values, I say by the end of this course, the students will be able to identify their own position with regards to parents' school choice, or it could be anything in the context of the spectrum of views. So these are different kinds of learning outcomes that I have defined for my own courses. And here I have shown you certain features of learning outcomes. So features of these outcomes are that they are very, very specific. They can't be vague. They are time bound. So you clearly specify in what time are you talking about. They are accessible. So they can't be like, that you stated something that can't be seen in the tests or any particular assessment task. They are realistic and flexible. I also don't understand what makes them realistic and flexible, but this is what people say, they are realistic and flexible. But what I've done here is I have put in a wrong or a very ill-defined learning outcome and then tried to rework it out. So one outcome, and this happens when you have NAC assessment, National Assessment and Accreditation Council, which comes and does a yearly visit and expects you to submit a self-study report. Even in that, now they are asking for learning outcomes, and there are so many errors in the way universities define learning outcomes that it's mind-boggling to see that in the whole nation you don't have a clarity in terms of how to define. So there are some mistakes that my university only did at a particular time, and then we corrected. So my university, my school in Perth, by the end of this course, students will be able to increase their understanding of and appreciate the theories of child development. Can you identify the problem in this statement? What is the problem with it? In the draft, don't look at the report, but just the draft part.
The outcome is vague.
Outcome is vague. Why is it vague, sir?
Because will be able to increase their understanding. Understanding is a very relative term.
Yes.
Up to what extent you will understand? So it's a relative and it's vague.
Right.
While it in rework the statement, it is clear that they will be able to explain different theories of child development. So it indicates the complete understanding, thorough understanding rather.
Yes. Understanding is a very general term. It doesn't really mean anything concrete, and one can identify it through different means. So what are those means? One has to be clear about. That is one problem. There is another problem here also.
Appreciate. This is not appropriate word here.
Appreciate is a little vague, although we can still be able to find out ways to address it. Yes, but it is a little vague term. It requires a value judgment on the part of it. So definitely, there is one more other problem. It's a very pragmatic issue.
Understanding. Oh.
If this term increase, how will you measure increase?
Yes.
Measuring the increase, you have to do a pre-test, and then do a post-test, and then measure increase. But there are still problems because increase is very quantifiable kind of a term. We can't measure now students' understanding has increased. I can't say that understanding has increased by 2 kilos or 3% or 1%. It's very difficult. This term is not very correct.
The mark system. Theoretically, quantify was the first three, this is the mark of the student. And after that, it is the marks of the student. This is the increase in quantifiable.
Absolutely. It is increase in quantifiable terms, but this is a problem here. The problem is that what have we quantified can be defined very well. Have been quantified in very objective terms. And what happens is when we say take this as an outcome and assign marks, and then say there is a difference in the score, a student can ask a question, why have you reducted 2 marks? What were you looking for in terms of increase? So one has to specify in very, very specific terms. What is it that we have measured? Right. So it becomes very challenging to do that in many areas. Maybe in certain areas it's very easy. Like in mathematics, it's very easy. So you've done this mistake, I deducted this much of mark. Physics, definitely. Chemistry as well. But in philosophy, in sociology, in politics, it's close to impossible.
But nowadays there are many examination mistakes, the MCQs, which it is well defined, I think, used for all subjects.
Right. For MCQ based tests for very factual areas, yes, definitely. But where we are not teaching. So, for instance, we are teaching literature, and the test is not MCQ based. So, we want students to be able to write a long essay. How do we do it? So, but it's a subjective thing. You can also, maybe in your area, it doesn't work this way. You increase maybe a fairly good term. So, it's not a very specific outcome. It is also difficult to assess. Therefore, it has to be reworked, and it has been reworked by stating that by the end of this course, students will be able to explain the different theories of child development and identify the distinguishing features amongst these. So it becomes, I know what am I going to ask in the test now. And the student has to enumerate all the theories, write 2 sentences about them, and identify similarities and differences. Now, there's again the second one where the first draft is not very well made. By the end of this course, students will be able to use secondary material effectively and think independently. What do you think is the problem in this statement? Use effectively, think independently. How do you measure whether a student is thinking independently or not? So this is again not accessible. Use secondary material effectively. So what does it mean to use? So I have a database and the student is able to use it. It's not really, any meaningful outcome. So it has to be reworked. By the end of this course, students will be able to evaluate the secondary material and employ this evaluation to develop or defend their position also. So these are again for social sciences. For sciences, the matter is not as complicated, and it's, in my understanding, easier to define outcomes, but still there are many mistakes that are.
No, can you go back to? See, what I was thinking is that if you have a topic which is being taught, and then you try to synthesize that what all questions can be asked out of it, particularly the objective type questions. Probably that will be helpful in deciding the highlight.
Yes, absolutely, sir. But what happens is that in areas that, for instance, I think I don't want to take objective type tests because I feel they limit the scope of what I'm teaching. I would like my students to do a debate, and I find that to be more meaningful than testing their specific position. So in those areas, it's very challenging to define the outcomes. And most of the critiques of learning outcomes also therefore come from social science. Scientists are generally, very akin to designing outcomes. It's not difficult. In fact, it's very practical. Scientists should do it. But again, if somebody wants to go beyond them, they should not become restrictive. So this was the perspective with which one brings in, but yes, what sir is saying, what you're saying is absolutely agreeable. And as I said, I think Professor Lena showed you this, maybe it wasn't able to show you. Bloom's taxonomy is the guidance taxonomy literally means a hierarchy. A divided kind of a hierarchy, which is organizing learning in 3 domains. Lowest one is psychomotor, which requires manual tasks. So a student will be able to handle a particular machine. Affective task, which is connected with thinking, one's feelings, emotions, attitudes, and cognitive are the mental skills. So these are the most advanced of all. And most of us as higher education faculty members operate with this. Psychomotor is usually done in very early years of school. We don't deal with psychomotor aspects unless we are in a special needs classroom where there are children, students with certain disabilities. There it is possible. Affective is also, of course, there embedded, but we don't really address this right away unless we are in areas like psychology. This is where most of our work lies, in the mental capacity of the student. And this taxonomy makes the life of people designing outcomes very easy, because what it does is it specifies the words that you can pick and choose from. This is very easily accessible. There are various versions of this taxonomy available, revised versions, unrevised versions. So what they do is, in those 3 domains that I had shared, they further subdivide. This is the cognitive domain, further subdivided, and they specify, what are the verbs for each of these stages. So, like for cognition, for mental capacity, one of the basic things is that a student should be able to remember. If they are not able to remember, it is very difficult to proceed further from there. So, remembering where they have given verbs like define, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat, state. So, in the formula, you have a choice to pick up from this list of verbs. If you remember, then it becomes possible to understand. And then again, there are a set of verbs that they have given: classify, describe, discuss, explain, identify. Then apply. Maybe a lot of your work lies in this area. Apply, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Because at undergraduate level, at least in our areas, it's very challenging for students to remember. But when they come to masters, they know the basics of things, and then we have to begin from here. In my domain, application is not very important. We don't work with applications, we work with analysis, understanding, evaluation. But this is something we want to achieve, create. So in our students, we want them to be able to create solutions for social issues. But we are not able to do it in our classes. It's very challenging. But maybe in your classes, you would have situations where students are able to create, which connects us to the project method that I did talk about. So,
I know, because sometimes I think that remembers to go in the last, because we understand and apply, analyze, create, then this will go into the student's mind and he will remember forever.
You're absolutely right, sir. So therefore, Bloom's taxonomy is critiqued quite a lot. Yeah, so you can't divide mental capacity in small pockets, pigeonholes, and then say this is a formula, if you use it and a student will learn. So you're absolutely right.
But this is also not wrong, because you can remember even without understanding.
Yes, you can not memorize. You can do a ratta of things that
Yes, that without understanding, if we remember, that also doesn't hold.
That's why
That's what the critics say.
it is on the bottom of the pyramid.
advancing. It's different because it's advancing. This is a skill on which this rests. You will not be able to create anything if you don't remember anything about that.
Is it related to number of the student and number of output?
It's the complexity of the skill. Complexity of the skill
And remembrance is embedded in understanding.
yes, and the application also. And you can't-
It is also the remembrance or memory is also embedded in analyze. Every step it is embedded in.
Remember should go.
So, have a different view. And the point about learning, talking about learning is that individuals have their own ways of learning. There are some students who will not do anything at all in the class, but last day they will come with a paper or some assignment which is brilliant. And you will see that, why are you even here in the class? So there was 2 students in my course and they just didn't speak. They were sitting in corner making a ruckus in the class, disturbing everyone. Students complaining. I had to ask them to please leave the class at certain occasions. But the end of the submission, when they came with their assignment, they wrote such a brilliant piece that I thought they should go straight to PhD. Rather than better than me. I felt, incompetent to assess anything. And we had to call a committee and, check if any plagiarism to nahi hai, kahin se utha ke to nahi hai. But no, it was their original, which was brilliant. And you would have seen the film Three Idiots, which, the kind of things the students were doing. But whatever nuisance they were making were brilliant. And they may be not, at the top of their class, but they were doing some things which were very fascinating and interesting. And similarly, there are other things, but I'm not going into this because it becomes too cumbersome. So, like I was saying, it's not always possible to break down learning in pupils. This is the problem. It is not always possible to do it, and teachers do not always want to do it. Right, like sir said that remembering, if we start by remembering, there's a problem in certain areas. The student may do a lot of things and then remember in a meaningful way. Learning may not be demonstrable. So, for instance, somebody has understood a political theory. They write it, they explain it very well. Yeah, but they don't agree with it. They have done it just for the sake of the exam. So should I assume that now they have understood and they will go ahead and do this? No. Students are very smart and they do, know how to crack exams. And they, sometimes verbalize things, they write things which they don't agree with and they never apply. But of course, they have probably understood or understood for a brief while. After the test, they'll fall. In our university, there was a summer break between 2 semesters. And there was one course which was continuing before and after the summer break. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was teaching. So now when the students have come back after 6 weeks, they don't remember anything. They had scored A+ when they went in first assignment, but now they don't know anything. So this tells me that learning was demonstrable at a particular time, but the students had not learned. They had learned for exam. And that's it. And standardizing is sometimes very difficult, especially, students coming from different backgrounds. For all of them who have one single outcome is sometimes challenging, especially in a class where there are students with learning difficulties, disabilities, etc., and other challenges. And when we define outcomes, we are focusing on minimums, mostly the minimums. At least this should be done. So what happens is sometimes we start to think in terms of at least. We don't even imagine to go to at most. So at least becomes the prevalent discourse. Again, in sciences, this may not be the situation. In social sciences, it's a major. So I close this discussion with this, and if there are any questions, they are most welcome. I'll show you the other project-based piece that I launched.
But what I understand that the remembrance of anything also associated with understanding. Until unless you understand something, there is no that we will go that after remembering that power. But if you are not able to understand anything, you cannot learn.
I completely agree. And there are, so this taxonomy was made in 1949 and we are still following it. And our understanding of learning has gone much ahead. When we teach in the classes, we are able to probably make our own individual theories of learning as well, which are, good in their own aspect. But there are certain policy regimes that we have to follow, we have to go with. The policy makers have identified large scale problems, they may not be applicable to our specific context. And therefore, certain standardized solutions are suggested. There are certain advantages, certain disadvantages that one has to live with.
Madam, we have our animal taxonomy. So, like there was a classification from like teams classification. It came very like late in the 90s or 80s. Afterwards, there was a modification in the invention of the science. So we are not following many things from the IMSS classification because it has improved with the research and anything. So there are the research in your domain also. Then why again you are going with the same classification?
Sir, there is a massive debate. If I tell you, the social scientists are, at loggerheads with each other on the matter of learning outcomes. The policy makers, the economists who engage with educational statistics, etc., they are defining learning outcomes based on Bloom's taxonomy. And there are educationists who are generally in an academic system, if you see even in the political system, they are, on the margins of the discourse on any because of different reasons. So they say that learning, the meaning of learning has advanced. We know more about learning. But how do you explain it? The way we talk is qualitative. We talk, take time, give resources. We may not be able to show results. This doesn't appeal to policymakers. Policymakers ask us that when we are investing, show us what have you done for the student. They want very specific things. Both are right in their own capacity. I don't say that the policymaker is wrong or that the other scientists and educators are completely right. There has to be some way to resolve this debate.
Person, ma'am, like we had, like you have shown that classification. We had a difference of opinion in this class because we are not exposed to this.
Completely.
So there are the people from your domain. There, many of them are not. They are not agreeing with this.
Yes, most don't agree.
So there are no research output like that.
There are several researches, but the thing is that our research is not powerful enough to make policy impact.
Yeah.
That is the issue. There are ideological differences, and in ideology, it is very difficult to say that this is right, that is wrong. It's ideology. And it's very interesting that our different political governments have so many different, views about everything. But on learning outcomes, everybody agrees. All parties agree. So all state governments agree, central government agree, international country, different country governments agree, UN agrees, World Bank agrees. Everybody working in education at the policy side agrees. Even with change in regime, you don't really get any elbow space to talk about it. If we talk in the way we do, scientific communities will also feel like, kya bol rahe hain? What are they even saying? That, let the student think. They will construct knowledge. The relation between teacher and student is most important. There is nothing pre-designed. Everything is designed in the classroom. This is some mumbo jumbo which is very difficult to really understand. So there are problems both ways. So there has to be some kind of a dialogue, some kind of a solutions exercise for the benefit of the student. So one of the examples that I bring here is again, from that. This is again a very buzzword project-based case.
I think learning outcome can't it be a continuous process, madam, rather than at the end of the course, we are associating with the learning.
Yes.
There are some differences.
So it is a continuous process. So when you start the process of making learning outcomes, you do it for the whole program. So if I have, say, if I'm teaching in MSc Physics, I will define learning outcomes for the whole program. And then I will define it for specific courses. And they will be stacked onto each other. Now, when you look at NAC, I don't know if your university institutions have NAC conducted. So in NAC, you will see formats which require us to map specific course outcomes onto program outcomes, onto university vision, which is, for us, it was an activity in hindsight. We had already proceeded, now we were imposing things on our curriculum. So the policy, the national policy says shift this whole approach, turn the whole system into outcome-based model, and not just India's policy, it's a global trend that all governments are asking us. So they are definitely continuing.
I have a point. This may not be a question, but just my analysis, like you told that your students before going to the summer holidays, they were very good when you took assessment. But when they came back, their understanding was not that good. I think this is because of our system. Because you see, in our undergraduate courses or some we study, but somehow the student make their aim that I will go for UPSC or this or that, those exams. But the syllabus of those exams are quite different than what we are teaching in the class. So what they are doing one night study. We have done also this. Just whole semester and one night we will study, mug up, right, and pass the exams. And we'll focus our whole attention to what our aim is. So this is the reason. If you would have given 1 day time that tomorrow I will take exam, they would have definitely done it better.
Right. This may not be my class because my students, they are very, of different kind. They don't apply. They are all aiming to become school teachers, mostly in private schools. So they are not planning to do a test like that. But what you're saying is completely right. From the school's time, this is the mindset that we develop about learning. That ये एग्जाम को कैसे भी करके पास कर लेते हैं, असली तो हमें वो वाला एग्जाम. So moving from one exam to another and not really grasping much. There were some people that I met, I won't name them, but they had cleared a very reputed examinations within the UPSC set. And after the exam, I went to them with a query that, see, I'm not able to understand how to do this. So this one of my friends said that वो तो मैंने exam के लिए सीखा था, उसको छोड़ दो. ये मैं book बता देती हूँ, उसमें जाके देख लो and हो जाएगा. So that is the framework with which we are. In fact, we are told this is the right way to do. So this is the problem that plagues our education system. And one alternative, because Ravindra sir said that I must talk a little bit about it. So this whole approach is the project-based learning, which is again not a new concept, and I'll skip a large part of it and take you straight to what it is. So it's a very old concept. In 1897, John Dewey was a big philosopher of education, who said that education should happen in workshops and laboratories. It should not happen in the way we teach. Like, this is not a good format for education according. And I think many of us will agree that sitting on a chair and listening to a teacher is not the best way to understand things. And he defines schools as social laboratories. That these are not, places to just ratify and go. These are social labs in a way. And therefore, he said that there is a need to reorganize experience, which adds to the meaning of experience and increases the ability to direct the course of subsequent experience. This is a definition of this idea of what a social lab is. So it's reorganizing what you see outside, what you experience outside in a meaningful way, so that it helps you experience the social world in even more meaningful. So like sir was saying, it's a process that grows. And I'll not again go in the definitions, etc. So it's basically it means learning is to be organized in relation to a purposeful activity. It will not be that I stand here and deliver a lecture. It is to be organized around a purposeful activity, which is a project. So that purposeful activity is to be done as a project, and the project is not, some fictional project. It's a real life project. It's very applicable to the everyday social reality. And I'll maybe show you the steps and stages in this. If we think of our classrooms in this way, then probably our this issue of mugging up for exams and treating education system only as a certification for something else will probably get addressed. One, that we identify the problem. We begin by identifying the problem which has a real life issue. I will show you an example. Agreeing on or devising a solution and potential solution to the problem. Designing and developing a prototype of the solution and refining the solution based on feedback from experts. Has anyone seen Shark Tank? Yes. There is a program, Shark Tank, where entrepreneurs identify problems. They come with a solution to those problems, bringing a product in. And then there is a panel sitting, and that panel critiques the product. They ask questions. The better you defend, the better you are able to explain what you're trying to do, the more chances are that you will get funding. So that is a very good example of a project-based kind of a situation. And it may not be applicable to all domains, like in certain very, very critical conceptual areas, it may not be possible. But this is the general sense that education should shift in that direction, and at least to some extent have certain overlaps with this. So there is a defining of a problem. You look at what is the nature of the problem, why does it exist, and how would it benefit the end user or the society. Generating ideas, you brainstorm, it's a group process. Then prototyping solutions, you design a dummy solution, and then you refine and finally test it. And role of a teacher here shifts entirely. Now, a teacher is not a theoretician here. The teacher is somebody who understands the field very well. Mentors the students in identification of the problem and solutions, and provides feedback for it. I'll skip this and show you one example. There is a course in my university, not a course, there's a full program, social design. And the whole program, 2-year program, is organized around projects. So this is a project that the students did during COVID time. They have 3 design studios. They are not physical spaces. These are courses, design studios. Where in the first studios, the students go on to find a problem. And in the COVID times, there were 2 students, Apurva Jain and Abhiran Sinha, who identified a problem, which was that the children in schools or otherwise in communities, they are not very aware of the COVID safety protocols. And 2, there are very, very strong misconceptions about people who are doing COVID work. Some kind of a fear that they should not go near. So policemen, doctors, they were being stereotyped, and people were misbehaving with them in different ways. So these 2 students at that time felt that they need to address this problem. And they thought that they would like to address this problem particularly with children, because they will determine the future of the country and everything. So what they did was they designed a game. They designed a game titled COVID News. And this game involved 5 heroes. They were children, elderly, migrant workers, police, and doctors. And basically, they made a maze like this snake and ladders type of a game, where one of these heroes is going to eventually win. So 5 heroes start their independent journey, and one hero wins. So this is a game that they designed. Which you can really, we won't be able to see very clearly, but when you zoom in, you should be able. So this is a game they designed, and this game was really very fascinating. They piloted it in their own local communities with children. Children approved of it, that yes, it's an interesting game. Teachers approved of it, and this game won a small prize in a design competition that was done. So their whole program focuses on such projects. So one of the projects was about libraries, that in rural areas, students don't have access to books. So how do we solve this problem? And they kind of designed a book bank where one student maintains a book bank for 1 month, and then it shifts. So it developed a book culture, a reading culture in the community and among project. So this is a project based, an example of project based learning. I won't go into depth of it because only 1 hour was there and I didn't want to step in. So I'll close here.
Thank you, Dr. Gunjan, and open to interactions and any queries. Dr. Gunjan has given us, I think, the whole viewpoint. So it may not be like at that level we can think, but we can have our own, if we are understanding what she is conveying the message, we can always develop such project-based learning outcomes for our, because it's a very nice lecture, very simple way I think she has explained. And all of us are working on those projects only, this group. So it will give us lot of inputs from her lecture to plan better way and see what is the outcome student can give us in a better way. So any other query from anyone else? Yes.
Madam, what I want to know is that, is the theory applicable to school children, undergraduate, postgraduate, and PhD to the same extent?
Check please. Yes, sir, I would agree. PhD maybe not, because PhD they are already working on a project which is of a different kind, where you are not preparing somebody who's going to immediately solve some problem, but a person who appreciates, understands theory, and is able to contribute to knowledge. But otherwise, across the board, it applies. But yes, I will say that it can't be, the whole system can't be project. There has to be other kinds of engagement as well.
General statement origin. There are two methods of teaching, because in our group also we had two different opinions. During teaching, whether the learner should be disciplined or strict, whether the learning outcome will be more, or if we allow them to be comfortable and create a friendly environment, so the learning outcome. So which would be the better approach?
There is some research in education on this. If you discipline the student a lot, the student stops to take interest in particular areas. It's something that we do. However, if you just let them do whatever they like, it becomes extremely difficult to structure the class. And and many a times, of course, students are independent thinkers. They do what they want to, and they should be able to do what they want to. But at some points in time, they are not able to make correct choices for themselves. So our task is to expose them to choices as well. If they just go in a certain direction, they will not even know that another direction exists. So it has to be some sort of a balance between these two approaches. But if the self-discipline culture could be developed, where you don't need to not inculcate discipline through rigid practices, that is the ideal situation. That happens sometimes when you talk to the student and at the very beginning you explain why are we here at all. That also doesn't happen. Students are never on board. Sometimes there was a very interesting piece that I read by somebody called Jerome Bruner. He was a very big cognitive theorist. He said that the problem of our education system is that we don't explain the structure of the discipline to students or the structure of the whole course of education to the students. If they know it, then they will probably understand why they are there. Otherwise, they are going from one class to another class, one lesson to another, one test to another without knowing what is this happening with us. And that also happens with us. Why are we doing it? Know what we are doing and we.
But actually, madam, when there is a 5 periods, or 6 periods, or 10 periods, the school education or maybe other, what is the answer? Even the student could not get a time to think this why we want to attend this one. Why that.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that is a basically problem of the stretching of our syllabus. That's how we are.
Problem is with our understanding of learners, we don't really understand that because we have also been taught through that same. It's become like a automated cycle. It's just running by itself in a default.
The very important thing is that how you can make your subject interesting to them. That is I think that is a movement.
Like I studied in US for 1 year. I observed several schools there. The way we discipline our children in India, out of question there. If you do that, you go to jail. If a student if a student is scared, you will go to jail. There's no question about it. And if a student creates a problem, teacher doesn't address it by shouting or hitting. What they do is they report to a committee. For each child, a 5-member committee sits. There is a special educator, there is a counselor, there is a parent, the teacher, the school, whatever in charge coordinator, and they invite the child for a discussion. This is out of question in our.
Ma'am, I have a point to make. The way the education system or the way the children or the student are being dealt in US, and you just quoted the example, is that leads to a more disciplined society than India?
I don't think so. It is not as disciplined as it would be, but the way the learners learn. Of course, I'm not saying we should go towards that model. But what happens is when you see somebody else, it tells you the problems in yours. That solution is not what I
Because there are some tags, and if we go by the social engineering aspect, Indian society is more disciplined than the US one.
It is, but is it a good way of disciplining? And is discipline always good? Is also something that one has to probably think. How do we discipline? We beat, we shout, we don't let a child do anything that he likes. Of course, things have changed now. I am talking of the times when I couldn't take the subjects of my choice until I reached the second master's stage. So imagine the disciplining that happened. And my parents thought that this is the best way for them. They were not doing something to harm me. They thought that this is the best. But it was imposition of.
Because US is a economic superpower, so we always just follow and just appreciate the things in each and every aspect.
Yes.
As far as the social things are concerned, US is not a better country, and US society is not a better society to adopt with.
Absolutely.
Although they are economic superpowers, they play in the tertiary and quaternary sectors of economy.
My point is not that US is better. I was just citing an example where the problem of my context becomes visible to me as an educationist. Again, there are problems in their context as well. many problems in their context. Our cultural context of, how we relate to children is very different. Like, stories, the way Dadi, Nani and others, senior people tell stories. It's not there.
We were shouted at, we were beaten up. Still our bonding towards our kin and kith and our families are more than the US citizens.
I won't justify beating and,
Hey, लेकिन madam,
Let us restrict the discussion because our next speaker is already waiting for last 15-20 minutes. So it was really Gunjan, very nice lecture and very nicely explained. Thank you so much.